Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Edna White, your host, and this is Keeping It Real on Purpose. And today we're so excited that you're here, and you could be anywhere else, but you're in the place where experts have in depth conversations about their life, relationships, and business in real time. This is real talk about real life, on purpose, about successes, failures, issues, and insights for a better life. And today on the show, we're excited to have Mary Beth O'Connor. She is an author and advocate of recovery and addiction coming out of the San Francisco Bay Area. Welcome, Mary Beth, to Keeping It Real on Purpose.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here, and we want to get right to it because, I know that these are two subjects. Being an advocate for recovery and addiction are two things that are really climactic right now. So we want to really get into this. So tell me how you show up in the world.
So my story actually starts with a lot of neglect and various forms of abuse in childhood. And I started using alcohol, which was my first drug when I was 12. By the time I was 16, I was using methamphetamine regularly, and within 6 months, I was shooting meth.
Wow.
And that continued, mostly for the next 15 years. I went into recovery when I was 32 years old.
Wow.
So I had a long history of drug abuse and drug addiction. I did in my recovery at 6 years sober, went to law school, and I eventually became a federal judge. So that's really the arc, from abuse to addiction to recovery and then to professional success, but even more important, success in life. I mean, the judge sort of captures attention to go from what I call junkie to judge, my story.
Yeah.
The reality is that the professional success is great, but it's not the most important, right? The most important of recovery is the lack of chaos, having good relationships, showing up for your family,
Absolutely.
All those other aspects. But I use the junkie to judge just to show how far you can go in your recovery.
Yeah. And I like that, junkie to judge. That's like so, because I was like, junkie. So you know what I'm thinking, you a hoarder. Because I'm thinking junkie, it's junkie in the house. And I was like, oh, that's what that means. So it stuck with me, and it sticks with me now. So I know that, addiction is something that kind of came out of the pandemic as well. Can you talk about things that you've seen coming out of that, just during this time now?
I mean, definitely there's been a significant increase in, for example, alcohol consumption in women. I think has the highest rate of increase since COVID. It's been interesting because for some people, COVID actually gave them an opportunity to step back from their excessive using or being in the midst of active addiction because they weren't out and about as much. But for a higher percentage of people, it actually was more problematic in large part because of the isolation. And so people were, and also it was a stressful time, right? I mean, a pandemic is stress. And so there were more people who succumbed to substance use disorders, including alcohol. There's also the highest rate of overdose deaths was in the past year. For the first time, the United States passed 100,000 overdose deaths in a year.
Wow. And that's really tough. That's hard. And I've seen it in the Black community as well. And like you said, the isolation is really the thing, the isolation. Let's talk about what your book brings to the table to kind of help, with this advocacy that you're showing up doing. Let's talk about what your summary of your book. What is it about?
So the book goes through, I say it's in 3 sections. So it goes through the neglect and abuse that I had in childhood, but also in my early adulthood. I had, not only physical, verbal, emotional abuse, but also multiple forms of sexual abuse.
Okay.
And so I got into that in some depth to make it clear why drugs looked attractive to me as a young teenager. And then I go through my drug history about the progression and also about what it was doing for me. Because in the beginning, it seems like it's a good idea. It seems like it's working. It just doesn't work in the long run. And for me, it quickly was problematic.
Right.
And then the book goes through at the last section is about my recovery, in particular my first 3 years of recovery, because my recovery is secular. In other words, it's not the 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous method. That wasn't going to work for me.
Okay.
And so I do go through what I was told and how I found other options and how I put together a program that worked. And I do now have 28 years of continuous sobriety.
Okay. You said something about the first part of your book that talks about how alcohol and drugs became attractive, or I'm sorry I missed the word, but I like the word that you used. Could you explain a little bit more, like how that can happen?
For me, when I first drank, and alcohol was the first drug, mood-altering drug that I picked up, it was really a release. I mean, I remember feeling like lighthearted and joyful and laughing and having a good time. My first alcohol was Boone's Hill Strawberry Farm wine, which was a popular sweet wine. But also it released some of the tension and the stress and the pain. And I started actively pursuing alcohol pretty much right away. It was something that I wanted to help me deal with my life. I cared less the traumatic events. There was just more. I was able to distance myself from that pain a little bit better, to numb out a little bit better, and so it made my life seem more comfortable than it had been without the substance.
Right, and see, it's so. I too am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I used my imagination to zone out, and I used it so much that I don't even have anymore. I used it so much. So I like what you said about us being, all of us are different, and when we take, you said that the drug of your choice was this, mood altering, and we all choose something, At 12, can you share, like, if you can go back that far, what was going through your mind at that time?
I mean, I lived in a high stress environment where violence might happen at any time. And you just never knew. I had developed a lot of techniques to try to reduce livelihood, but you couldn't control it. It was out of your control. Right. I mean, there were things that might trigger it that maybe you should avoid, but beyond that, you couldn't do a lot.
Right.
So there was just that constant stress of not knowing when the violence or some other assault was going to happen. And with drugs, that just worried me less. I just didn't care as much,
Sure.
I wasn't walking around as tight and clenched as I had been previously. And so it seemed like this is a useful tool. This is something that's helping me.
That I can control myself.
Yes. Let me do more of that.
Yeah. Right. And it's not funny, but it's we adapt, it's like we have to find something, and, I remember in my childhood, my parent always told me, you're to be seen and not heard, and your voice is not I guess your voice is not wanted or even accepted when it is, and so finding ways to kind of relieve the stress. And I like what you said, young people experience stress, that's important to say. That's really important. Parents don't believe that, and sometimes still they don't.
That's true. I mean, even any child is experiencing some version of stress. I mean, certainly the children in this pandemic, I'm sure they've been feeling a lot of stress, and there's been a lot of disruption to their lives. But even in normal circumstances, kids have academic pressures, they have peer pressures, they have the desire to fit in, and maybe it's not quite working out for them, or they don't know how to communicate or whatever it is. So all children have stress. But when you grow up in an abusive environment, it's at a very, it can be at
Heightened.
a higher level.
Yeah.
And so you're looking for relief.
Right.
The problem is that relief is really short-lived, and the drugs just turn on you, and they can turn on you pretty quickly. And for me, there were problems fairly early on. And then it turns out that what looked like a help is actually its own big problem.
Yeah.
That now you have on top of all the other problems you started with.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's not a good long-term solution, but in the short term, it can seem like it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you're a judge. You went to college, and now you're a judge. Are you in that profession right now?
No, so I was appointed a federal administrative law judge in 2014, and then in 2020 I took early retirement.
I got you.
And so now what I do really is I talk about multiple paths to addiction recovery.
Okay.
I talk about the connection between trauma and substance use disorder. I do podcasts like this. I go to speak at conferences, and then the book. The book is really, I view it as part of the advocacy.
Right.
And so it's all sort of tied together. So that's how I spend my time now.
Okay. All right. And did you celebrate, like, once you completed that step and it was something you wanted to do, did you celebrate? Did you really go ham, dancing, inviting friends over? What did you do to kind of create that space that I did this?
When I became a judge?
Yeah.
I mean, it was certainly, when I went into recovery, it wasn't on my list of things that might happen to me. It wasn't something I envisioned.
Yeah.
And part of I say that in part because people in recovery, there's no way to know where your life could go. I was 20 years sober when I was appointed a judge. You can't really predict what's going to happen in 20 years of sobriety, right?
Right.
But it was a really big moment. It was and it was also a moment of reflection. That's when I started thinking about the book. Like, how did I go from that abused child who's shooting speed in high school, and found a way to get to the point that I was actually appointed a federal judge? It was really a time of reflection for me.
Yeah, and okay, I get it. The celebration was the reflection. And that's great. That's great. That's really great.
Don't get me wrong. I was very excited. But,
I'm sure you were. Because I'm excited to even hear that for you. Like, I don't know too many women judges, personally. And I think I've met maybe 3 in my life. And I'm in my 50s. So now I add you to the list. That's 4. But,
That's right.
But that's, monumental. And thank you for sharing that, because we need to hear that those things can be accomplished no matter where we are in life. When we wake up and we do the work, and we can do this and do that. And I like how you said you retired early. Love it. Extra love it. Extra love retiring early. I love that. Can you share?
And my point too about the 20 years is that the truth is it's all a step-by-step progression, right? You're making the next choice, the next positive step. When I got out of rehab, and I was 32 years old, and I had a Berkeley degree, and my first job was a part-time, low-level admin job, temporary, because that's all I could handle, because I wasn't ready. And so it was really moving myself. What's the next step? What's the next job after that? How do I move forward? It's not like I had some grand plan, and it's not that I had no plan, but you're already looking ahead to what's the next step I want to go to, and what do I need in order to get there?
Oh, that's really good. That's what you said is amazing about taking it step by step, not trying to get to like this higher level, and just saying, let me just put myself out there, and it may not be where I want to be, but maybe this is my step.
Right.
And oh my gosh, that's like really, because so many times we feel like we have to make up, for the time lost. Regardless if we had trauma or we had addictions, we feel like, okay, here I am 40, oh goodness, I need a job, and you try to step up, higher than you are. But I like how you said it takes small steps. And I'm sure you appreciated that small step.
I mean, in the beginning, I really did have to force myself to look backwards. So in my early recovery, right, I'm 32 years old. I've really, destroyed myself professionally. I've destroyed most of my life. I had a pretty low bottom. But when I was in my recovery, mostly my natural inclination was to see everything I hadn't fixed yet, everything I didn't have, and all my mistakes. So I had to force myself to consciously pause intermittently and
that's good too.
Look backward and see how far I come in 6 months or a year or 2 years to sort of reassure myself that there was a positive progression, that I was moving forward, and that I wasn't at the end of that forward momentum.
That's really, really good. Pausing. That's really good. That is good. Audience, I need you to hashtag pause. That's really good. That is good because we don't pause. When a lot of times in our lives, we don't pause, and that's really good. That's great information. Like, I like that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm excited about the pause because I always say pause. When you feel the pause. Don't think I have to be doing something, right?
Well, I just think it is true that many people are like me, and what we see is the negative aspect of it, right? I'm not where I want to be, or it's not going fast enough. I mean, I know in my early recovery, I certainly hoped it was going to go faster than what it did, but realistically, you can't fix everything on day one. You've got to get a plan. You've got to prioritize, right? You have to prioritize.
Right.
What are the things I want to work on first?
Right.
What are my top 5 or 7 priorities, and everything else has to wait because you can't fix it all at once.
You can't fix it all at once. And you said something earlier. You said something about the secular. You came a secular way. Can you share about how did you come? Like, because I'm only familiar with the 12 steps. How did you? What was it that helped you come towards sobriety? Can you share about that?
So when I went into a rehab, and I was in a long-term treatment facility, I was in for 5 months. They told me, and this is 1993. They told me that the 12-step way was the only way.
Right.
Well, I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in a higher power. But I also didn't like the powerless idea. I didn't like the focus on defects. But they swore this was it. There's no other option.
Okay.
And so they kept pressuring me, telling me I was going to fail if I didn't comply.
Right.
But when I got home, I actually thought, is it true that there's no other option? So I emphasized, it's 1994 now. I went to the library because there's no Google.
Right.
And I went looking for other recovery options, and they did exist. They just hadn't told me. And so there was Women for Sobriety, which still exists. There was Rational Recovery, which is basically now SMART. And there was SOS, which is basically now LifeRing. And I'm on the board for LifeRing. And it's LifeRing Secular Recovery. So these were all programs that focused on self-empowerment instead of relying on a higher power. And that's what I used to build my recovery foundation.
So, I'm going to pick with you, right? You know that, right? Okay. So, I'm all about dispelling all these myths. And share with me what atheism is. And share with my audience what it is.
Well, I will say, just to clarify, not everyone it's not just atheists who like options other than 12 steps. A lot of people that actually have faith. But LifeRing members, for example, a lot of them have personal, spiritual, or religious beliefs, but we just know it's not required for recovery.
Right.
But for me, atheism, it means that I don't believe in any external force. I don't believe in a higher power. I don't believe anything's guiding us, or moving us, or that there are positive or even negative forces in the world that are directing things. And so,
that's heavy.
I believe when you die, that's it. Your molecules go back out into the universe, but your consciousness is gone. And so now, don't get me wrong, if people find value in a higher power for their recovery, and a lot of people do, the 12 steps is a really good fit for them, and I encourage them to go wherever, do whatever's going to work for you. But for me, it wasn't the right fit. Not only did I not believe in a higher power, I wasn't going to turn my will and my life over. That's just not how I view the world. But
That's
on the
so
other
great.
hand, not turning my will and my life over doesn't mean I think I have total control of everything. Because I
No,
don't.
no, I get it. No, I really do get
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I love that you shared that because I am one that was brought up that there's a higher power out there. And not until my 40s did I realize the higher power was in me. And I'm always kind of challenged with that. And I don't look outside for outside forces
Right.
to kind of, move me along like I'm a robot because it doesn't sit well with me. And I was always given that atheists didn't believe in God and da da da. But I was like, but they're moving in the power of themselves. That's always like atheist moves in the power of themselves, that they have the ability to do what they need to do. And that's I always used to say that, and you're making you're clearing that up for me, and that's great. I like
I
that.
mean, that's a good way to say it because sometimes I get, well, you think you're the higher part. No, I don't think I'm higher. I just think, that I am responsible for my own life.
Yeah.
In Life Ring, we teach that as to recovery that each person is responsible for their success. It's their motivation and their efforts that determine the outcome.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I totally agree with you that we're the ones that determine all of that. And I love it. I love it. Just love it. Okay. I'm excited, audience, because our guest today is really breaking things down that biteable sizes. Mary Beth, you're really doing it. Can you tell us, is there, where you are right now, you're in San Francisco, and we're, of course, I'm in New York. Is there, have you done some, research on, the recovery and addiction balances in different areas? Is it more someplace else and less somewhere else? Can you share a little bit about that, the demographics of all of that?
I mean, I don't know of any data that shows that there's one geographic area
Okay.
that's more likely to recover. On the other hand, I will say that some communities
Okay.
have better supports than others, which can.
And what communities would that be? What communities?
Well, I mean, for example, San Francisco actually has a problem with the number of beds available for people with substance use disorder. They have a good number of resources, but we have more people who need them than we have available beds, and
Right.
that's problematic. In other communities, they may be better. They may have a better ability to care for people immediately, to admit them when they're ready to go, and not
Right.
have long wait lists, which we can have here sometimes. So here, there's a lot of acceptance of substance use disorder as a medical condition, and that's positive.
That really is.
Positive, but there's not enough treatment options available on a daily basis. There's more people that need treatment than there is a place to put them, and so that can be problematic. But in other communities, they can just be financially devastated. I know,
Right.
for example, methamphetamine. There are parts of the South where methamphetamine has really sort of destroyed communities. It's so rampant
Really?
there. And sometimes those communities are not as wealthy as San Francisco, and
Right,
might not
right.
have all the resources available for people. But it really can be community by community. Also, for example, what's the rate of insurance? Right, California
Right.
has
Yeah.
a higher rate of medical insurance than some
Right.
other states do because they provide easier access and they subsidize it more.
Oh my goodness, that's great.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, when I went into rehab, they made me wait 2 months. I was on a wait list, and that's
That's
troubling
scary.
because-
Yes. Very. Yes. Anything could happen within the 2 months. Oh wow.
Yes, anything could happen, but I didn't have insurance, and so I had to wait. I had to wait until my name came to
Right.
the top of the list.
Wow. Yeah. I just visited Sacramento, and my heart was sad just visiting and seeing, those outdoors, and I come from, the industry of housing and knowing about homelessness and knowing about the unhoused, and I was like, what are they doing over here? I'm upset, and it just made me more conscious of, there are addictions when you are trying to soothe, where you're from, because you can get an addiction even in the late period. Am I right? Not, it don't have to be like when we're young, right? We
Yeah,
can
there's
get.
actually a pretty significant substance use disorder rate among the elderly
Mm-hmm.
for multiple reasons, but including lack of connection and
Right.
isolation. Also,
Right.
because sometimes they get access to pain medication because they have
Right.
legitimate, pain, which they
Right.
then can turn into a problem for them.
Right.
So definitely, I mean, the youth is a common time, but certainly there are other periods of time. And then I would say for homelessness as well. I mean, there is a substance use disorder problem, but there's also just a mental health,
Right.
problem in general that's not always being treated appropriately. So
Right.
it's not always substance use disorder. It can be other mental health conditions
Right.
that put people into homelessness. I just saw a big study about the percentage of women who've been victims of domestic violence who end up
Yeah.
homeless. So there's a lot of factors in homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
and California does have a challenge as to dealing with the numbers of homeless in the state.
And so does New York, because I worked on a very large organization, a nonprofit, and they were getting the numbers. And of course, I would say, Mary Beth, you are probably like me. You're calculating in your head. If you service 10 people, you're calculating the data, what's making the move. What's the problem? You're in your head. I know you're probably doing that just like me. And when working with my clients, I noticed that there was no. They didn't believe that there was trauma involved in not having a home.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
interesting.
yeah, so having not having a home was not trauma, because they were in a shelter, had a roof over their head, or they were being serviced by somebody who came and kind of like gave them food and gave them a tent and make sure they're okay. There was no trauma involved in that. And so I said, that's traumatic. Like,
It is. It is.
it's traumatic because being unhoused, meaning no home. Home means a place of safety, and that's traumatic. So they never addressed that, and then they never prepared them. And I know when you talk about recovery and addiction, you talk about step by step, and that's being prepared, right?
It's interesting you say that they didn't do it as a trauma because I know that the adverse childhood experiences check, criteria, that the list that you go through, how many of these experiences have I had? Poverty is on that list. Poverty is an adverse childhood experience. It's an adverse adult experience. It is traumatic to be having that, as we talked about, that stress and strain of,
Oh yeah,
am I barely making ends meet? What's going to happen when one thing goes wrong? It can push
absolutely.
me all over the edge financially. That's a very stressful situation. And then
Right.
if you're unhoused, it's even a higher stress situation.
It is very stressful. I'm supposed to be asking you this question, but you get me like totally deep. I had a client that really touched my heart because she was in the shelter and she lost one of her child. Because of where they were, she had asthma. She was in a shelter. She had asthma. She didn't know what it was, like didn't know what the issue was. She was in a shelter, but after the autopsy, they found out that there was mold spores in her lungs. A small child. That's stressful. And guess what? She still is in the shelter.
Right.
And I still can't believe that the powers that be, now I'm not saying superpowers, but the powers that be do not realize that. And it takes someone like you as an advocate of recovering addiction to really hone into that. And plus, you have this, being a judge and seeing all this stuff in real life. It adds to it, and it's important to understand that where you are, it's powerful. Like where you are right now, to be able to say, "Hey, I'm an advocate, and this is what I'm going to do." That's powerful.
I mean, you are right. I think what we've done is we've each chosen, where we're going to have the most impact, because there are many social issues I think we would both like to work on, but you
Sure.
can't, work on them all. And so for me, I do feel like advocating this way, getting attention for, first of all, that there are multiple paths to recovery, and it's important to let people know they have options so they find
Oh,
the
that's
right
good.
fit.
No, stop talking right now. Share the multiple paths. Keep talking about multiple paths because in New York, I think we're only taught the 12 steps. I
Oh,
think.
no, no.
But I want you to talk about that, to share that with the world because that's powerful.
So the reason that I talk about multiple paths is I just want people to know that there are options so they can find the right fit and therefore increase their odds of success. So, for example, right now I'm on the board of She Recovers Foundation and Life Rings Secular Recovery. She Recovers is started as an online community. There are about 325,000 members, and She Recovers is
Wow.
for recovery from substance use disorder, but also recovery from trauma and mental health issues and other behavioral disorders like
Wow.
eating disorders, all in one place, because most women with a substance use disorder have other challenges as well.
Right, right, right.
And so we started out online, and it has a very robust online community, has online meetings every day. There's regular, talking
Wow.
meetings, there's yoga, there's dance, but there's also local chapters
Right.
that do get-togethers around the country.
Wow.
And then Life Rings Secular Recovery, pre-COVID, we had about 200 meetings in the country and about 6 online, but now we have like 80 Zoom meetings, and we're starting to go back to some in person. But no matter where you are in the country, we will have online meetings going forward in a significant number, so you will have access. There's also Smart Recovery. There's Dharma Recovery. There were a number. Women for Sobriety is a really strong group for women. They had meetings in New York prior to COVID. I think they're still mostly online. So if you want to, Google secular recovery
Wait,
or
hold on.
addiction recovery alternatives, you will get a list.
Addiction.
And I just recommend that people read up on the different groups and see what attracts them. What group sounds like your people go there? Go to that group.
So addiction recovery alternatives.
Yes, or secular addiction recovery. You will be able to find options that way. SAMHSA, SAMHSA,
Yeah.
They have a list of peer support groups, and the alternative groups are there as well.
That's wonderful. This is such good information. And I'm not going to pretend like my family doesn't have issues because, hey, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't need to filter. So I will say that this is such great information for all of us. This is such you've opened up a really great area for me, and I was going to ask you how did we debunk things, but you already did that, so I'm not going to ask you that. I want to say, Mary Beth, you are like such a great resource for this addiction and recovery. What do you already gave us the resources. Can you tell me in the beginning when you started, what was one of the biggest failures? Because Facebook and social media have made everything no failures and with all filters, right? We have to talk about failures. And the one thing I'm going to tell you, the one thing I didn't like about the 12 steps is that they immediately told you you're going to fail. I didn't like that. So tell me what one of your biggest failures were and how you overcame to help our audience.
So one of my biggest personal failures was that I actually went to law school right after college, but because I had started using meth heavily again in the middle of my senior year after in part because of a multi-assailant rape, and I moved in with a violent boyfriend, I had to withdraw from law school, and I was accepted at Berkeley Law, which is like a top 10 law school, because I was so deep in my addiction, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't finish. There was no way I could do it. And so that's in 1984. And so every time I was in Berkeley and anywhere near the law school, it was just agony of what I had given up. People would kill for that spot, and I had lost it because of my addiction. But eventually, once I got sober, and I got sober at 32, when I had 5-6 years, I started thinking about, well, what's my best professional path? And, I'm in my late 30s at this point, and I decided I was going to try again to see if I could go to law school, if they would take me back. And it turned out that Berkeley wouldn't take me back, but I got into another good law school, Hastings, and then I was number 3 in my class of 400, and then Berkeley took me back. Okay. And I transferred to Berkeley, and I did in 2003 get my law degree from Berkeley Law. So that was a major accomplishment to get back something that I had lost in my addiction.
Okay. That's good. That's really good. That's really good information. What would you say was one of your best resources that helped you, or something that really helped you?
I mean, people do better in recovery if they have friends and family support. Okay. I mean, the data is clear that your odds are better. And so if you don't have that friend or family support, it can be very helpful to build your own support network. But for me, I did have my husband. He was, when I went into rehab, he was really done with me. He was done with me. But he did allow me to move back home after I got out and to see if I was going to be able to succeed. And even though he was frustrated with me and angry at me, and we did a lot of couples counseling, he still really was, I knew he wanted me to find my path. I knew that he was hoping I would find a way out of my substance use disorder. And also I had a stable home, right? I went home. I went out of rehab to a stable household. He let me move back. Again, that's an advantage for me over what some other people face. They have a bigger challenge in that area.
Right.
And so he was really a help to me in my early recovery, even though we weren't sure if our relationship was going to survive. He was at least being a friend by letting me try to get my feet underneath me.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. That is really, really awesome. Now, what is the name of your book again? So our audience
book is called From Junkie to Judge, One Woman's Triumph Over Trauma and Addiction. And it is available for order on Amazon and all the usual sites.
Wonderful. So this has been great information for the audience and for myself to get to know all about your business and what you do. I am truly a better person because of that. So now we're going to turn the tables and get to know about you personally. So I'm going to ask you a few questions that will put you on the spot and think about how beautiful you are. So what is your best compliment you ever received?
Oh dear. I will say that when I was in my struggles as a child, I was always viewed as smart by my teachers, and I got a lot of positive reinforcement at school, and that helped me a lot when I was young.
Me too. That's good. That's really good. What would you pick for your last meal?
I would definitely pick something chocolate for dessert.
You and my granddaughter would definitely be friends.
Maybe a chocolate with a raspberry sauce on it. That would be probably perfection there. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
You notice what I think of first. What's the dessert? I don't know. For the meal, I might actually want New Jersey style pizza that I grew up with as a kid. That might be something that I would want. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I heard Connecticut pizza was better.
Oh, well, I haven't tried Connecticut pizza, so I can't say for sure, but New Jersey's pretty famous for pizza, yeah.
Okay. I will have to travel there, because I live in New York, but I frequent, I haven't gone to New Jersey. I need to go. I think New Jersey Shores kind of made me say, I don't want to go. Yeah. But I think I have to go there. But I've been to Connecticut. Their pizza is phenomenal. And I'm gluten-free and lactose-free. Phenomenal. I will say, I was praising them. I could eat pizza after 5 years. It's like,
Oh, that's great. That's great.
like it was
Yeah.
amazing. No stomach ache, no bloating, no nothing. I was so excited, and it tasted good. Like it would taste like real pizza. So I will say, but I'm the exception. So I really am. So if you had a billboard all your own, what would you put on it and why?
I think I would probably say something along the lines of, you can recover. Signed, the junkie who became a judge, or something like that.
That's excellent. That's excellent. That says it all, right? Says it all.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope
it,
so.
it says it all. So, final thoughts. What's your best tip you can share with other women, men who are either getting to business for themselves and want to do something, be an advocate like you?
I think it is important to really think about what skills you have and where your heart is. So,
Oh, that's good.
as we talked about, there are a lot of areas we could work in and advocate for, and you just can't do them all. Some of them you might have a stronger inclination for, or some of them your skill set might match up better. And so that would be what I would think about. Here's the 5 areas I would really love to make a contribution, but looking at the skills that I have, here's where I think I could actually add the most value.
That's beautiful. That's really good. I think that's important, really important. And you said something that's important, intent. Make sure that, our intent is where we want to go and what we want to do and why we're doing it. That's really good. So this brings us to the end of the show. Audience, I want to thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed it, and even if you didn't enjoy it, let us know. But support us, share your thoughts, share with others, and post it about social media and leave a rating. And listen, we have a new button that if you have a question for our guest today, just leave the question and I will get it to her fast in a hurry. Remember that we're talking today to Mary Beth O'Connor, who is an author and an advocate of recovery and addiction in the San Francisco Bay Area. So if you want to find where I'm at, now you know where I'll be. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at EJW Coaching. I hope to see you soon, and thank you again for listening. This is Edna White and my esteemed guest, Mary Beth O'Connor, saying goodbye for now.